Two channels coming together. Oh yeah. True crime team, you better know. After the facts and defense rest, let's go. Bringing justice, doing their best. Woo! Facts are flying, truths unfolding. Criminals shaking, their stories holding. Defense rest, got the legal mind. Together they solve, justice they find. All rise, the truth's in the house. Y'all bring it up, breaking it down. Hear that call? Facts and defense, a mighty blend. Oh yeah, justice ain't gonna bend. Gavel hits, the facts commence. Defensive moves, we've got the sense. Teamwork strong, no crime secret. Yeah, they're bringing justice. Best believe it. Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
This crime is either life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death. Attorneys will have an opportunity in a few moments, if they wish, to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorneys a chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the penalty phase of the trial. What the lawyers say during opening statements is not evidence, and you're not to consider it as such. After the attorneys have had the opportunity to present their opening statements, the state and the defendant may present evidence relative to the nature of the crime and the defendant's character, background, or life. You're instructed that this evidence, along with the evidence that you heard during the guilt phase of the trial, is presented in order for you to determine, as you will be instructed, 1, whether each aggravating factor is proven beyond a reasonable doubt. 2, whether the aggravating factors found to exist beyond a reasonable doubt are sufficient to justify the imposition of the death penalty. 3, whether mitigating circumstances are proven by a greater weight of the evidence. 4, whether the aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating circumstances. And 5, whether the defendant should be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death. At the conclusion of the evidence and after argument of counsel, you'll be instructed on the law that will guide your deliberations. Aggravating factors. An aggravating factor is a standard to guide the jury in making the choice between the verdict of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death. It is a statutorily enumerated circumstance that increases the gravity of the crime or the harm to a victim. You must unanimously agree that each aggravating factor was proven beyond a reasonable doubt before it may be considered by you in arriving at your final verdict. Your vote on each aggravating factor, the state you will vote on each aggravating factor the state has alleged. Your vote does not have to be unanimous. However, in order to continue to consider the death penalty as a possible penalty, you as the jury must, at this stage, unanimously determine that at least one aggravating factor has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If the vote on any single aggravating factor is not unanimous, you will not consider that factor as proven, and you will not consider it in your further deliberations. If you do not find that any aggravating factor has been proven, your deliberations are complete. The sentence will be life in prison without the possibility of parole. The state has the burden to prove each aggravating factor beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such doubt must not influence you to disregard an aggravating factor if you have an abiding conviction that it exists. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, you do not have an abiding conviction that the aggravating factor exists, or if having a conviction is one which is not stable, but one which wavers and vacillates, then the aggravating factor has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and you must not consider it in providing your verdict on the appropriate sentence to court. A reasonable doubt as to the existence of an aggravating factor may arise from the evidence, conflicts in the evidence, or the lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt as to the existence of an aggravating factor, you must find that it does not exist. However, if you have no reasonable doubt, you should find that the aggravating factor does exist. Before moving on to mitigating circumstances, you must determine that the aggravating factor or factors are sufficient to impose a sentence of death. Again, the vote is not required to be unanimous. However, if you do not unanimously agree that the aggravating factor or factors are sufficient to impose death, do not move on to consider the mitigating circumstances. In other words, if you do unanimously find that the aggravating factor or factors are sufficient to impose a sentence of death, you then proceed to consider mitigating circumstances. If your vote on sufficiency is not unanimous, your deliberations are complete, and the sentence will be life in prison without the possibility of parole. Mitigating circumstances. Should you find sufficient aggravating factors do exist to justify the imposition of the death penalty, it will then be your duty to determine whether the aggravating factors that you unanimously find to have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt outweigh the mitigating circumstances that you find to have been established. Now, unlike aggravating factors, you do not need to unanimously agree that a mitigating circumstance has been established. Rather, whether a mitigating circumstance has been established is an individual judgment by each juror. A mitigating circumstance is not limited to the facts surrounding the crime. It can be anything which might indicate that the death penalty is not appropriate for the defendant. In other words, a mitigating circumstance may include any aspect of the defendant's character, background, or life, or any circumstance of the offense that reasonably may indicate that the death penalty is not an appropriate sentence in this case. A mitigating circumstance need not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt by the defendant. A mitigating circumstance need only be proven by the greater weight of the evidence, which means evidence that is more likely than not tends to prove the existence of a mitigating circumstance. If you determine by the greater weight of the evidence that a mitigating circumstance exists, you may consider it established and then give that evidence such weight as you determine it should receive in reaching your conclusion as to the sentence to be imposed. The next step in the process is for each of you to determine whether the aggravating factor or factors that you have unanimously found to exist outweigh the mitigating circumstance or circumstances that you have individually found to exist. The process of weighing aggravating factors and mitigating circumstances is not a mathematical or mechanical process. In other words, you should not merely total up the number of aggravating factors and compare the number to the total number of mitigating circumstances. The law contemplates that different factors or circumstances may be given different weight or values by different jurors. Therefore, in your decision-making process, each individual juror must decide what weight is to be given to a particular factor or circumstance. Regardless of the results of each juror's individual weighing process, even if you find that sufficient aggravators outweigh the mitigators, the law neither compels nor requires you to determine that the defendant should be sentenced to death. Once each juror has weighed the proven factors, he or she must determine the appropriate punishment for the defendant. In this final decision, the jury's decision regarding the appropriate sentence must be unanimous if death is to be imposed. To repeat what I've said, if your verdict is that the defendant should be sentenced to death, your finding that each aggravating factor exists must be unanimous. Your finding that the aggravating factor or factors are sufficient to impose death must be unanimous. Your finding that an aggravating factor or factors found to exist outweigh the established mitigating circumstances must be unanimous. And your decision to impose a sentence of death must be unanimous. Now, weighing the evidence. When considering the aggravating factors and mitigating circumstances, it's up to you to decide which evidence is reliable. You should use your common sense in deciding which is the best evidence and which evidence should not be relied upon in making your decision as to what sentence should be imposed. You may find some of the evidence not reliable or less reliable than other evidence. You should consider how the witnesses act as well as what they say. Some things you should consider are, does the witness seem to have an opportunity to see and know the things about which the witness testifies? Did the witness seem to have an accurate memory? Was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's questions? Did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? Did the witness's testimony agree with other testimony and other evidence in the case? Victim impact evidence. You may hear evidence about the impact of this murder on the family, friends, and community of Taiten and Robert Baker. This evidence is presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resultant loss by Taiten and Robert Baker's death. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating factor. Either party have any objections to instructions?
None from the state, Judge.
No, Your Honor.
All right. For the record, all the parties are present, the defendant is present, all the jurors are present except the one that has been excused. We'll go ahead and commence them with state opening statements.
Thank you, judges. Yes, sir. Defense counsel, may it please the court. Ladies of the jury. Robert and Taiten will never get to go to high school. They'll never go on a first date. They'll never get to drive a car. They're never going to get to graduate college. They'll never celebrate another Thanksgiving with their families. Never have another birthday. Never open up presents on Christmas again. They'll never get to get married and never have their own family. Ladies and gentlemen, they are dead. And they are dead because this man sitting right here brutally and viciously killed them. This case is about the circumstances and the facts about what happened to them. This case is now about what the appropriate sentence is for that heinous, atrocious, cold, calculated murder of those boys. Ladies, the only fair and just sentence would be death in this case. The only appropriate sentence for taking those boys' lives, they will never get to grow up, is death.
Objection, Your Honor, misstatement of the law.
Overruled.
We don't take this responsibility lightly, and we don't expect you all to. This is going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. It's not an easy decision. But if you remember in jury selection, each of you promised, you swore that you could possibly impose the death penalty if the situation was appropriate and it warranted it. Now we're at that step. We're going to ask you, after the close of this phase, to impose the death penalty. I want to outline a little bit about the process that we're going to have. I know the court went through it. It was long, and we don't expect you all to be lawyers. So the question is, has the state proven at least one aggravating factor? And I'll explain the ones we anticipate proving to you, or the ones we've already proven to you through the guilt phase. If you find that we've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt, then the next question is a aggravating factor or the accumulation of the aggravating factors enough to exist sufficient to warrant the imposition of the death penalty? Thirdly, the next step is, do those aggravating factors outweigh the mitigating circumstances found to exist? I anticipate you will get mitigating circumstances. And then the question is, were those proven? And if they were, does the aggravating factors outweigh those? And then the ultimate question, as the court said, is based on those considerations, should the death penalty be imposed? Now, you're going to hear a lot of information in this next phase about mitigation. A lot of the aggravation, or most of the aggravation evidence, unbeknownst to you, has already been provided to you through the guilt phase. And I'm going to outline that in just a moment. What I want y'all to understand, and what the court told you, is when you weigh these aggravating and mitigating factors, there's only a finite amount of aggravating factors. They're set by the legislature. But there is an infinite amount of mitigators. So it's not just that there's 40 mitigators, 3 aggravators, that the mitigators win out. It's a weighing process. You get to look at it, and it's like this, a little scale. You may find that one aggravator is like a bowling ball, and it outweighs 40 jelly beans that could be the mitigators. That's for you to weigh later. So keep in mind that it's not the number, it is the quality, and in the accumulation of that quality, do they outweigh? There is going to be 3 aggravating factors for Robert, and there's going to be 4 for Taiten. And I'll explain why in a moment. The first 2 aggravators that the legislature has decided are aggravators for the death penalty. The first one is, was he previously or contemporaneously convicted of a capital felony? What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is for Robert Baker, Taiten Baker's death is a contemporaneous or previous capital felony. And for Taiten Baker, Robert Baker's death is a contemporaneous or previous felony. The legislature has determined that this is an aggravating factor for you to use. So if you remember during the guilt phase, you've already found him guilty of both those murders. So in essence, when you go back, this has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. You've already made that finding. So there really is no going to be a question when you go back there. The second one that the legislature has determined is the capital felony was committed while he was engaged in a burglary. If you remember the guilt phase, each of you went back there and you've already found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of burglary. This aggravating factor, you'll find, has already been found by you beyond a reasonable doubt. So those 2 are the easy ones. Not that they're easy factors to weigh, but you've already made that finding. The third one that's going to be applicable to both boys, and this is to Taiten and Robert, is the murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without pretense of moral or legal justification. The fourth one, and I'll explain third and fourth a little separately, the murder was especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. And that applies only to Taiten. And the reason is in order for heinous, atrocious, and cruel to apply, you have to be conscious and aware of what's happening to you when you're murdered. So Robert was killed while he was sleeping. There's no evidence indicative that he was awake. So when you weigh it, this one is going to be the heinous, atrocious, and cruel. It's only going to be applicable to Taiten. We've already talked about this, and we've already talked about that, but cold, calculated, premeditated manner. This is what the definition the court will give you. Cold means in a calm and cool reflection, and calculated means carefully planned or prearranged design to commit murder. If you remember from trial, the evidence that you heard and that you will be able to rely on in this factor, in this phase, is he armed himself with 2 weapons. And they were different weapons, a hammer and a knife. Not only did he arm himself with 2 knives, he went into that residence with a knife and a hammer, and he used both of those. So you're going to be able to use that to determine cold, calculated, premeditated, a factor. The number of injuries to each boy and the manner in which they occur. That's going to be another factor for you to use, cold, calculated, premeditated. And then his statements. These are just some of the statements that are going to indicate the cold, calculated, and premeditated nature. Did she tell you to go in there and kill the boys? Yes. You heard that in the trial? That was one of the statements he gave to the police. Did you go through the pool room? Yeah. Robert is by the bookshelf. Taiten's on the floor near the pool table. You were pissed. Yeah. I was supposed to take care of the boys, and Cindy was going to do the other 2. All of those statements go toward whether or not it's cold, calculated, and premeditated in this case, ladies and gentlemen. And there'll be more I anticipate that Ms. Dunton will bring out and close it. Taiten was moving while he was killed. Another factor that he was aware and he hunted him down for cold, calculated, premeditated. Then he cleans the weapons when he's done and he hides them. Another factor for you to consider is consciousness of guilt in reference to the cold, calculated, premeditated. And then he writes that note ahead of time with those like little hidden meanings. That once again is a factor. Ms. Dunton will go through a lot more. I don't want to take up hours going through it, but she will highlight those in closing. Finally, heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Wickedly or shockingly evil. Atrocious, outrageously wicked and vile. Cruel, designed to inflict a high degree of pain with utter disregard or indifference to, or even enjoyment of, to the suffering of others. So in this case, the kind of crime it's intended to be included as we call, you may hear people reference HAC, that's the abbreviation for heinous, atrocious, and cruel. So if you hear that, that's the same thing as heinous, atrocious, and cruel. But this is the kind of crime intended to be included as heinous, atrocious, and cruel, is one accompanied by additional acts that show the crime was conscienceless or pitiless and was unnecessarily torturous to Taiten Baker. And just a quick highlight of those. Taiten was alive during it. Remember, he had his hand up and his hand got slashed at. He was trying to defend himself. And then he falls to the floor where he's bleeding from his neck. And he knows at this point of his impending death. He knows what's about to happen. He knows he's going to die. And he's crawling on the floor, hoping to get to that phone, maybe to call for help. But he's aware of what's happening. He's being cut. It's not one cut. He's cut more than 20 times on his neck and his stab wounds to his body. And what Dr. Fulcher told you is he was most likely up for up to 30 seconds about that. If we were to take 30 seconds right now, that's how long Taiten was alive, knowing he was going to die, and fighting for his life. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, ladies. So used to the other. I apologize. Ladies, we're confident once you hear all the mitigation in this case, and once you weigh that mitigation against the aggravation, that the aggravation will greatly outweigh the mitigation. And we're confident once you make that decision, you will take that next step and you will determine that the aggravation in this case, the circumstances, the facts of this case warrant the imposition of the death penalty. Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm going to hold the opening until after the victim is talking.
Okay. All right, State, you may proceed.
State call Sarah Baker.
All right, Ms. Baker, go ahead and take a seat, please. First, we place you back on the list.
Do you solemnly swear affirm that the testimony you'll give in this call shall be the truth, the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, please go ahead and start off by again stating your full name for the record.
My name is Sarah Baker.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Dunn.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Good morning, Ms. Baker. Again, for the record, just state your relationship to Robert Taiten Baker.
I'm Taiten and Robert's mother. Okay.
And you prepared a statement for court here today?
I did.
Okay. And you can go ahead and read it whenever you're ready.
I'm not sure where to even start. I was supposed to explain to you how this has affected me, how it has impacted my life. In all honesty, I don't think it's possible. I've wasted multiple notebooks and paper trying to write this. Okay. Everything I write doesn't seem like it's enough. I shouldn't even have to write something like this. How do I describe to you how much my boys, Taiten and Robert, meant to me and my family. How do I get you to understand the pain, the constant lump in my throat, or the complete nightmare I live in every day? Taiten was born. Taiten was born June 12, 2006. And when he was 4 months old, I found out I was pregnant with Robert. So growing up, my boys were close, way closer than any other siblings. I watched them grow the most unbreakable bond with each other. They always knew what the other one was thinking. Even when I handed out chores, they would just look at each other and know who was better at which one. And they would just trade and switch it up. But they would also help each other. They had the greatest bond. But they also had two totally different personalities. Robert was strong-willed, hard-headed, and so incredibly smart. If he had actually been given the chance, I know he would have changed the world for better. At only age 12, my boy was already offered a scholarship at the Polk Community College. Over the summer, for the special academy program, he would have received 3 years of college of his choice for free tuition. He was really brilliant, and he was very interested in robotics. Robert was the younger of the two, but don't let that fool you. He was the protector of the family, of his family. He always knew how to fix a problem. He was shy to most, but was the world to me. Taiten was the complete opposite of Robert. He was so talkative, outgoing, open-minded, very big-hearted. He was so well known for his smile. His smile was so big, and he was always smiling, no matter what was going on. He was just one of those people that nothing could ever bring him down. Taiten had a heart of gold. He would say or do or give anything to see someone smile. He was so easygoing. Everywhere he went, he made friends. So Taiten did not mind the move we were about to make to the new town, a small town, the town of Melrose. Taiten and Robert were both excited. They had 4 cousins in the same age group and would be going to the same school as them. They couldn't wait to start their new schools. So once we decided to move to Melrose and be by our family, the long house search began. In June, we finally found the house we all loved. It had everything the kids, my husband, and I needed. Plenty of space. And this was a big house. They were so excited to move into. They picked their rooms out before we even closed on the house. They loved the game room, the yard, and the pool. All of us were so excited. On June 16th, we closed our new home and began the move. It was a lot of work for us. A little sad for me to leave the only home they had known their entire lives. We knew that when I decided to move closer to my family, that I would Who would know? I'm so sorry. Who knew that when we decided to move closer to my family, that I would lose 2 of my kids, my children. My whole adult life, I have loved. My whole adult life, I have lived 3 hours from my family. I needed to be closer to them. The house we bought was just 1 road over from my father, my stepmother, and my brothers. We were so excited to live close to them. We were already planning all of the fishing trips and camping trips that we would take, but all of that would come to an end before it ever even started. The morning of August 26th, I found my precious Taiten and Robert, my boys, my babies, my pride and joy, both with such bright futures ahead of them dead in my new home. I can't raise my children to become good men. I knew I couldn't raise my children to become good men. I knew they could be. The chance was taken away from me. Landon, who was just 4 at the time, will never get to make another memory with them. He will grow up lonely without the love of his brothers over him. I will never see how far in life Robert would have gotten. Who knows? He could have been the doctor who discovered the cure for cancer. I will never get to see Taiten have children of his own. He loved kids. And he wanted so many of them. Their futures were taken away from them every day. I wake up. I have to get through another day without my boys. And I am forced with the pain, the guilt, the hurt. And my family and I now have to face this pain and this torture for the rest of our time in this world. As the trial ends, as this trial ends and the world continues to spin, I will still be left here staring at 2 teddy bears, 2 stuffed bears that contain the ashes of my own children. That is all that I have left in this world, is my wonderful boys. Good, get down.
Thank you. Step down. State your next witness.
State House Colton Baker.
Speak there, speak directly in the microphone.
You solemnly swear from the testimony given in this house to be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
All right, please state your full name for the records. I am Colton Baker. Ms. Duncan, you will proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Baker. If you would explain to the jurors your relation to Robert Taiten and in the family.
Was his oldest brother.
And you're here today to read a letter that was written by someone else, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was the letter written by?
Mark McCumber Jr.
And who was Mark McCumber Jr. to the boys?
Best friend.
And do you know his approximate age?
16 now.
He's 16 now. Okay. So he would have been 14, same age as Taiten.
Yes.
Okay. And you can go ahead and read that one.
I don't know how to start this letter out, but I'm going to try to get it out. It hurts to write this letter. My name is Mark Anthony McCumber Jr. I moved to Polk County in 2014, and I've lived up the road from Robert and Taiten Baker. We went to the same school, Slice Elementary, together. That's where I met them. They were my first friends I made when I moved to Mulberry. We became great friends. I would stay nights with them and them with me, but we were more at their house, more things to do. I was with them more than I was at home. During school breaks, school days, and nights, we were more like brothers than friends. Me and Robert were like peanut butter and jelly, as everybody would say. We did everything together. We played baseball and went fishing. That was our thing. We would swim in their pool all day and night, doing cannonballs, jumping through the floats. We would eat hot dogs, sandwiches during lunchtime out by the pool. Mama Sarah would make lunch for us. The morning my mom got a call about the boys, she cried because she didn't know how she was going to tell me that I lost my best friend / brothers. I remember it like yesterday. She came into my bedroom and woke me up crying. I was so confused because I didn't know what was going on, so she sat next to me and told me that the boys were murdered. At first, I didn't know how to act. I was more in shock than anything, hearing that they were gone, and I would never be able to see them or talk to them with them ever again. Let's just say this, losing Robert and Taiten Baker, I lost me. Let me tell you how I no longer play sports because it was what we did together. I no longer go fishing, and I love fishing, but when I go, I think of the boys so much and how much they love fishing. I don't no longer go to school either. This whole thing affected me. I had to go to counseling due to the trauma, and I still lay in bed wondering why he did it. I never came out my house, and I blocked out family and friends due to the trauma I was going through. I want him to know he not only took my friends, but he took my brother's lives from not only me, but their family as well. My whole life stopped. I miss my brothers. I lost myself and was getting in trouble. I just didn't know how to go on carrying in my life without the boys being here. But my mom and counselor would always tell me, the boys don't want this for you. Robert and Tate would want you to do better for yourself. I look up at my wall every day to remind myself that they might not be here in person, but they are in my heart and memories. Since Taiten and Robert are gone, all I have is memories. Missed attention.
State Paul Kelly Toza.
If you're going to take a seat, what the place you got on there?
Do you solemnly swear affirm that the testimony you'll give in this call shall be true, the whole truth, and nothing but yourself? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your full name for the record.
Kelly Coco.
All right, thank you, ma'am. This time you may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Coco, just remind the jurors of your relationship to the boys.
They're my cousins.
And if you would, read the letter that you prepared for today.
When Taiten was little, we called him our sunshine baby. With perfect tan complexion and the biggest, brightest smile. He would light up your whole world. Taiten in his 14 years had grown so fast. I remember seeing him on his 14th birthday at his grandfather's house. I was so shocked at how much taller he had gotten in just a few months of Christmas. Robert was the quiet, more reserved brainiac and protector. Both Taiten and Robert would play Xbox with my son Austin all the time. It was a way for them to stay close even though they lived 2 hours away. Taiten and Robert absolutely Taiten and Robert absolutely loved coming over to my place for our annual Easter party. Both of them would call me throughout the year with new ideas for games and relays for the next party. My son, he sure had some competition with that pie eating contest with those boys. Most of my favorite memories were at our Easter party. It was a time our whole family got together, and we would have over set activities for the kids. On August 26, 2020, those plans and all of that joy was stolen from us. I awoke to my phone ringing that morning with my uncle calling. I remember feeling panic and disbelief. I couldn't even breathe. My uncle had just said that Taiten and Robert had died. I didn't understand. And I was repeating those words out loud as I heard my son, who was 10 at the time, collapse in the next room. I hung up with my uncle so I could console my son. After I called Boston, I called his dad to pick him up so I could head to Sarah. I remember the drive, the 30-minute drive to Melrose, and how I had kept thinking it was a car accident. When I arrived to the Shiloh address, I saw Sarah, and she was just devastated. I won't ever forget the way she looked that morning. Combination of terror, emptiness, shock, panic. That's when I learned that Taiten and Robert were dead and that it wasn't an accident. And then I remember the days that followed and the shock we all felt. 2 years later, and I still feel that way. You can't fix that feeling after a tragedy. The paranoia doesn't go away. In the weeks following, I let Sarah, Chad, and Landon and their pets temporarily moved into my house in Gainesville. There was no way they could stay in that brand new house anymore. So they had to begin the long process of looking for a new home. I had to take off a year of work to undergo extensive therapy for me and my son. I was unable to sleep, eat, or shower. Taiten and Robert's death have caused me nightmares, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a constant living in fight or flight mode. I was unable to cook dinner for my family or go into the general public to even grocery shop. This has put a giant hole in my heart that will never be filled. Taiten and Robert were such an important part of my life, and I love them so much. Nothing is ever the same. And every holiday is just another gut punch. And remember, we can't create. I miss Taiten's cooking and how he would proudly wear the chef hat and apron I made him. I miss Taiten's hug. This is my sweet teddy bear. I miss all the plans I had made with them. And I was looking forward to the fishing trips with Robert. Robert might have been quiet, but he was going to do big things. I remember congratulating Robert 4 days prior to August 26th about how proud I was of him, the scholarship speaker. Taiten would have been the best chef. And Robert, he would have changed the world. I am filled with grief and depression. Some days I still can't get out of bed. This is a constant nightmare that I cannot escape. It's like being on a merry-go-round, and it just won't stop. On August 26, 2020, I was robbed of a life that I had planned with my family. I was forced to break my temple. A reality no children should ever experience. I'm forever haunted by Taiten and Robert's first.
Call Chad Baker.
Sure, come on up here, take a seat right there, speak directly into that microphone if you would, please. And of course, place you under.
You solemnly swear affirm that the testimony you shall give in this call should be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, please state your full name for the record, please.
Chad Baker.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Button, you may proceed.
Thank you. And if you would, Chad, just tell the jurors your relationship to the boys. I know you haven't testified yet.
I'm Taiten and Robert's father.
And did you prepare a statement for today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, whenever you're ready, you could read that statement.
All right, you have to bear with me at this time, but I'm nearsighted. So they want me to write about my two wonderful boys and tell you what they meant to me, but I don't even know where to begin. I'm a father of 5 wonderful boys, and every one of them is so different in many ways. Boys looked at me as the fun dad, always wanting to have fun and go places like theme parks, play video games with them, and many other things. Taiten and Robert were so special to me. Taiten was only 14 and had so much going for him. He loved to cook, play outside, play video games, loved watching those videos on TikTok and YouTube. He loved animals. Taiten had ability to make friends wherever he went. Everyone wanted to be friends with him. He was not shy when it came to making new friends. Taiten loved adventure and was fearless. I remember Taiten was 4 or 5 years old, went down to the lake with a jet ski, having fun for the day, and he kept playing on the kneeboard and kept driving the rope like he was behind the jet ski. So we got him already on the kneeboard, and the next thing you know, he was kneeboarding at 4 or 5 years old. After he was done, we got back to the shore. Other people that were there saw him out there behind the jet ski, and they asked how old he was. And we told them, and they was very surprised at how young he was and doing that. Fast forward a few years, Taiten wanted to learn how to cook. So during one summer, we signed him up for a cooking class at Publix. He came home, he loved it so much, and he begged us to go up and get him an ice cream machine so he could make ice cream. He learned to make a cooking class. We got him the ice cream machine, and he made us some ice cream. It was so delicious, and he was so proud to make that for us. I'll never forget the smile on his face as he watched us eat the ice cream. He loved to help his mom in the kitchen cooking dinner. He also loved to help me make dinners. When I got home from being on the road, he would help me in the kitchen. Cooking together were some of the best memories of Taiten. He wanted me to show him some of the recipes that I cook so he can make dinner for us. Taiten played baseball, and he was so good at it. He started out playing in the outfield, but he found that the position he really liked, and it was being a catcher. He loved playing baseball, but I think he was going to go to school to be a chef, as that is what his passion was. He loved cooking. As I said, I was the fun dad. We went places like the theme parks and did other things like that. In fact, we had plans to go over to Universal Studios to watch a concert, but that was the time that COVID happened and they canceled everything. Right before we were getting things ready to sell a house in Lakeland, I used to mess with Taiten by coming to the room and saying something that he showed me from one of the TikTok videos that he watched. He would get so mad at me, but was laughing at the same time. I would give anything to have those moments back. But these are some of my memories that I have of Taiten. I will not be able to make any more of, as he was taken from me. We were teaching him how to drive. We just got him convinced to play football. He didn't want to because he was a big boy, and he didn't want to hurt the other kids because of how big of his size. I will never get to see him grow into a great man that I know he would be. He would have been a great father to his own kids. He had the biggest heart and loved everyone, no matter who you were. Not long after Taiten was born, Sarah got pregnant with Robert. Robert would have been 15 today, and he had so much going for him. He was so smart. He got selected for a college program that he turned down because he didn't want to be away from Taiten, as it was going to put him in a different school, and he wanted to be there for Taiten. To this day, I don't know how Robert was able to balance the things that he did. He was an AV honor roll student, played baseball, played video games, loved to go fishing, and loved to catch lizards with his little brother, and so many other things. On the weekend prior to his death, he went flounder gigging with his papa, and he loved it. That is all I heard about when he got home, and he wanted to go again. He caught his first flounder that weekend, and he was so happy, grinning from ear to ear. Robert was the smallest of the two, and loved when I could get in the pool, when I would get in the swimming pool with him and throw him from one end of the pool to the, I apologize. Throw him either end of the pool, or I would toss him out of the water high in the air. He loved to copy some of the dances from his favorite video game, Fortnite. Robert was shy. Robert was the shy one when he was younger. One of my best friends, Donnie, came up with a nickname for him. Used to call him Mom's butt plug, because he would never leave Mom's side for nothing. And it kind of stuck for a while, but he hated it. But however, he embraced it after a while because he knew it was true. There are so many stories that I could sit here and tell you about the boys, but I think we would be here for a long time. I can tell you wherever the boys went, they made someone laugh at some point while they were there. Taiten with his outgoing personality and Robert with his shyness at times. They were the perfect combo. One last thing about both of them. The last day that I got to see them, earlier in the day before I left for work, Robert and I got to play a bunch of games of pool together. He won more than half of them. I gave him a big hug before I left and told him that I wanted a rematch when I got home, since he won more than me that day. Robert told me he was going to kick my butt when I got home. I told him we will see about that and that he better practice. The last time I saw Taiten was when I was leaving, was the same day while I was leaving for work. I was back in my semi-truck out from the street, and I realized I needed some wipes from the house. Taiten said he would run to the house and get them for me, but that was a long run. So Sarah took him back to the house to get them. And she said he ran into the house because he didn't want me to wait long. She drove back up to me and he ran from the car to the semi-truck to get them. Semi-truck to get me them. And he had the biggest smile on his face. I gave him a big hug and told him I would see him on Friday. Those were the last times I saw Taiten and Robert. I will never see them again. My heart is completely broken and I've lost without them. They will be dearly missed, and one day I will get to see them again. Sorry, I put the lights on.
All right, thank you, sir. You will step down.
Yes.
State your names with me.
Yes. You don't make it.
I apologize, you guys.
It's gonna be.
All right, Ms. Benson, if you go ahead and take a seat here again, speak directly into that microphone. Clerk will place you under oath.
So I'm Sawyer from the testimony to give this call should be the truth and the truth and the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, would you go ahead and state your full name for the record?
Deborah Michelle Benson.
All right, thank you, ma'am. This time when you're ready.
Yes. Ms. Benson, if you just remind the jurors of your relationship to the family and the boys.
I'm their step grandmother.
And did you prepare a statement and also a PowerPoint presentation with photographs of the family tonight?
Yes, I did.
Okay, if you can go ahead and read that.
It seems almost impossible to be able to stand up here and summarize how much these boys meant to me in just a few short paragraphs. How can you sum up a lifetime of pure love into just a few words? Back in 2005, when I became pregnant with my first son, Sarah announced a month later that she was pregnant with Taiten. I wasn't too thrilled at first about being pregnant with my teenage stepdaughter, but that's the way our story started. We got used to it real fast, and it turned out to be amazing. 3 weeks after I became a mother, Taiten was born, and he made me a grandmother. Sarah had Robert the following year, and then I had my second son. And then together, we had 4 crazy, wild boys whom I loved fiercely. These boys weren't allowed to call me grandma, but I loved them with every inch of my heart, and I shared an insanely special bond with each of them from the moment I first held them. To this day, now 2 years later, I still haven't been able to process the fact that they are gone, or to truly make it feel like this is our real life now. I still try to live in denial, because denial is so much more comfortable than the ugly, horrendous truth. I try not to think about that day. Every time it enters my mind, I quickly try to block it out, but it's nearly impossible not to think about them, because every time I look at my older 2 boys and watch them play or fight with each other or just laugh and have conversations with them, I am reminded of exactly what we lost. And I can see every single day through my own sons just how much we're missing without Taiten and Robert here. We lived 2.5 hours away from Sarah and Chad, so we only got to see the boys for birthdays, holidays, or special trips up or down, which thankfully we made quite often. But every time we got together, I cherished. When they were little, we would take week-long trips down there, and the boys would have a blast with each other. Taiten has always been the happiest, most talkative little boy, with literally the biggest smile, and he was a friend to everyone he met. He was the sweetest little guy, and he loudly lit up every room he entered. He had no problem being the center of attention. Robert, I'm not gonna lie, he was a little stinker as a baby. He was the type that had to grow on you at first. Now, I loved that boy dearly, but deep down, I knew every time we'd get together that he was gonna end up biting one of us. He was definitely the opposite of Taiten. While Taiten was happy and outgoing and never met a stranger, Robert was much shyer, more cautious, but yet he was never afraid to throw a punch. As a little boy, he was completely glued to his mama. He would always find a way to attach himself right onto her. I remember each time we visited, if we ever tried to take Sarah out of the house without Robert, it would involve a lot of crying and pleading and begging and bribing. And ultimately, Robert usually ended up winning and tagging along with us. I really worried about how that boy was ever going to start kindergarten. But over time, all that feistiness and mama's boy behavior molded into something so completely wonderful. Robert not only started school, but we found out that he was insanely bright, so very smart, and all of it came so naturally to him. Year after year, he received A's and tested high on all of his state testing, and that tough little toddler that loved to punch and bite and never left his mama's shadow grew up into the most loyal and loving boy. He was cautious and selective about his friends, but if you were lucky enough to become friends with Robert, then you had a brother for life who would have your back through thick and thin. There were many times that little Robert would stick up for and go after the much bigger kids who would bully Taiten. Their brother bond was so strong. Robert was smart, loyal, sweet, wise, funny, very athletic, and a huge animal lover. He had a way with all the animals. I knew he was going to go so far in life, and I was looking forward to watching him succeed in everything he put his mind to. Every time I left him, I had to hug him tight. I knew he hated hugs, And when he was little, I used to have to chase him down for those hugs. But as he grew, he learned to accept the fact that Debbie had to have her hug. And within the last year of his life, he actually began coming up to me for the hugs. Of course, I played it calm and cool on the outside, but on the inside, I was doing backflips over it. Robert was only 3 weeks shy of becoming a teenager when his life was taken. He was just starting to get a little peach fuzz mustache, and his voice was going through the change. Whenever he talked to me, I would pretend to yell at him, stop talking with that man voice, and grow back down. He was so excited to go to a new school with my boys and his cousins and meet cute girls. I teased him and my son constantly about the cute girls, and I just knew they'd become each other's wingmen. Robert was excited to turn 13. His birthday is 2 days after my son Nathan's birthday, and they usually shared a big party every year. And this was going to be the first party in their new house with all of us together. Of course, we were already planning it, and in their words, it was going to be epic. Unlike Robert, Taiten was not that great in school. He just wasn't made for sitting quietly and learning, not when he had so much to say. That boy could take a simple point and turn it into a 30-minute story. He was as social as they come. He never, ever spoke without smiling, and it was infectious. There was not a mean bone in his body. He considered every person in the world to be his friend, and he would talk to anyone and everyone without hesitation. Many times, he would go out for a short walk and come home with half the neighborhood kids and ask his poor mom to make them all snacks. And she did. Sarah was that mom that would feed everybody. For his 12th birthday, Taiten came to stay with us for a week, and I brought him to the sports camp at our local church. He signed up for a week of soccer to be with my boys, even though baseball was his passion. And of course, by the end of the week, he had befriended all the coaches and all of the kids, and on the last day of camp, they pulled Taiten up on the front stage while the whole camp sang him happy birthday. I'll never forget his smile that day. Thankfully, we have it on video, and someday I'll be able to watch it again. We took him to Domino's afterward, and we let him order a whole pizza for himself, his favorite, pineapple and ham. Taiten loved to eat, and he loved to cook. Every time we got together, I ended up cooking a big meal or baking something from scratch with Taiten by my side, always helping. He had just started going to a cooking class in Lakeland, and whenever I would visit, he was so excited to cook for me and show me what he had learned. His specialty was eggs. I don't even like eggs, but I would eat that boy's eggs. Taiten also loved kids. If there was ever a baby or a toddler around, he was always there asking to hold them or play with them, and he took such pride in helping with his little brother. I remember once we all stayed at a resort in Orlando that had a massive water park section for the kids. As soon as we got there, my boys took off for the big slides before I'd even found a chair. But Sarah told Taiten and Robert that they had to stay and play with little Landon in the kiddie pool first. Taiten didn't whine or pout at all. Instead, he put on his big goggles and he grabbed Landon and jumped into the 10 inches of water like it was the best thing ever. He did everything for his little brother without hesitation or complaint. I just knew that he was going to grow up and make the world's best husband and father. I couldn't wait to watch him start a huge family. And I always joked that Robert would be the very rich uncle. Sarah and I both had a third son many years later. So now every time we got together, we had 6 wild and crazy boys. And we were both the type of mom who always said, let them be boys. For our boys, that usually meant WWE anywhere and everywhere. I remember taking them all to a big Easter egg hunt in Lakeland one year. We dressed them in nice clothes and we combed their hair. When we got there, we had to wait in a really long line. Most kids, they stood next to their parents in their nice clothes and their pretty dresses waiting patiently. And then there were our boys, about 10 feet to the right of the line. rolling and wrestling in a loud, tangled up mess, getting grass stains, messy hair, and dirt all over. But they were having so much fun, and we just looked at each other and laughed. Others might have disapproved, but those were our boys, being crazy boys, and it made my heart happy. I could sit up here and I could tell story after story of camping trips, beach days, fishing, movie nights, birthday parties, holidays, and every story would include 6 loud, crazy boys wrestling and having fun, making memories, and just being boys. And I am so grateful for all the memories that I have to cherish, but also devastated that we don't get to make anymore. In 2017, my youngest stepdaughter was in a very bad car crash. She spent 9 days in a coma, with doctors telling us that she may never wake up, and that if she did wake up, she may never talk or walk. Everyone dropped everything, and Sarah, Chad, and the boys stayed up here for weeks while we hoped and prayed and waited for her to improve. She eventually did wake up, and she did learn to talk and walk again, but she suffered permanent brain damage and many medical problems that go along with it. Still, we're very grateful for her recovery, and I thought for sure that was going to be the most traumatic experience our family would endure. Then, just 7 months later, my other stepdaughter got very sick, very unexpectedly and very rapidly. An infection took over her body, and we found ourselves right back in the ICU, all of us around her, fighting for her life. Very sadly, we lost her a week later to septic shock. Her death shook our family hard. It was so unexpected, and it showed us how fragile life really is and how important it is to spend with your loved ones. We were so devastated to lose someone so beautiful and full of life. And at that time, I thought losing her was going to be the most tragic thing that happened to our family. We vowed to spend as much time as we could with each other from now on for Andrea. And that was when we began to try to convince Sarah and Chad to move up here with the boys. It took a whole year to get her to say yes. She was torn between not wanting to be with her family up here. She was torn between wanting to be with her family up here, but not wanting to take her boys out of the only school they've ever been to. She really wanted them to grow up in the same town with the same friends for their whole childhood. However, we convinced her that it would be so much better for the boys if they were here with their cousins and uncles and all of us, and that family really is everything. After a whole year of bugging and bugging, they finally agreed to sell their house and move up here. Excitement doesn't even begin to describe what our family felt. We have a very large family, and when we all get together, there are usually at least 12 kids running around, and all of us wanted Sarah, Chad, and the boys here with us. It took another year for Sarah to get her house ready for sale, to paint over all of the handprints and repair all of the scratches and holes and small damages 3 boys tend to do to a home when they are young, and get it ready to go on the market. I think I called her once a week asking, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? And then finally it sold, and they found a house up here in Melrose, just 1 street over from our house. A house with a pool, a yard to play football in and throw big parties, and it even had a game room with a pool table in it. We were ecstatic. So many plans were made: fishing, camping, beach, birthday parties, weekend parties. I truly felt that life was perfect. I remember actually saying that out loud, that life was finally perfect. I had so many things I wanted to do with them, with Sarah. All of us were so excited to finally have them up here with us. Still can't believe that they only got to live here for 2 weeks. The first day they got here, we were coming back from a camping trip. I was so bummed that Taiten didn't get to go because he loved camping just as much as I did. But it didn't matter because he was going to go next time. Robert stayed the night at our house on the second night. He was very close with my Nathan, and they goofed off all night long, and I never took any photos. But it didn't matter because I was just going to take some next time. The first weekend that they were here, I did the most loving thing that I personally know how to do. I made an entire Thanksgiving meal, from the turkey to the dessert, all from scratch, right in the middle of August. I spent all day in their new kitchen with Taiten asking me 20 times if he could help. He usually always helped me in the kitchen, and I knew he loved to cook and wanted to show me what he had learned. And I planned on showing him so many things, but next time, I kept telling him to go play with the boys, go swim in the pool, he could help me next time. That night, they showed me their rooms. Robert's was already set up with his baseball jerseys proudly hung all over the wall and his clothes neatly in the dresser. Taiten hadn't gotten around to it yet, but he had plenty of time. We talked about where the Christmas tree was going to go, and we played pool at their new pool table. It was a perfect day, the first of so many more to come. I didn't take a single picture though, because I could just take some next time. 2 weeks is all we got with them. I have lived hard with the guilt of pushing them to move up here, with the what ifs. What if they had stayed down there? Would this have happened there? Why did this happen to our family? Has truly been shattered over their senseless loss. None of us are okay anymore, and I can't imagine that there is ever a way to truly heal after such a horrific tragedy. We lost Taiten and Robert, and we lost the life that we had before they were killed. We lost the joy and the excitement of getting all the kids together for every birthday or holiday, or just because nothing has ever been the same without them. And I know that it never will be. None of us are even the same person that we were before they were taken. Everything is so different now, and all of the children in our family has suffered a loss that is just too big for them, a real life nightmare, and there's nothing that we can do to make it better. August 26, 2020 was truly the most tragic day of our lives, but the real pain and torture came in the following days, weeks, and months. Waking up the next day after only 4 hours of sleep and realizing it wasn't a bad dream, that a nightmare bigger than I had ever imagined possible was our new reality. I couldn't eat for weeks. None of us could sleep. I didn't want to close my eyes. The amount of stress and grief we felt in the next few months was so enormous, and we didn't know how to deal with it or even accept that it was real. Twice I went to the emergency room for chest pain because it felt like my heart was being physically crushed. And both times I was sent home with a diagnosis of grief. Grief is something all of us are learning to live with. They say that time helps heal, but for me, every day that passes is another day that they lost. It is not fun to watch the rest of our children grow up without them. Time passing does not heal the hurt. We lost the lives that we had all planned out. All the excitement we had for the future has been crushed, and now we're left with pain, intense, severe physical pain and grief. Robert's 13th birthday passed. We didn't know what to do with that day. Halloween came. We didn't know what to do with that day. Thanksgiving, Christmas. That Christmas was so hard. Trying to go out shopping, already with a heavy heart, and then seeing all the stuff that I would normally buy for them. I remember breaking down in the middle of the store that year, surrounded by happy people. For the children, we do a balloon release with each passing birthday in honor of Taiten and Robert. The past 2 years of navigating this new life has been torturous, and the realization that we still have to face this truth every day for the rest of our lives, living without the boys, always missing them, always wondering what they would be doing now, and wondering why 2 completely innocent, amazing, incredible boys had to be taken from us at all.
Thank you, Madam Minister. Just done.
That's all, Judge.
City Attorney the sidewalk for a minute? We don't need to put it for use for approximately. All right, ladies and jury, we're going to take about a 10-minute recess. They asked for 5, but 5 will work. So if you would step into the jury room, same admonition as we had. Formally retired to deliberate, you've heard all the instructions. Your notes there on your.
And the way that we get there is mitigation. Now, in jury selection, we talked about.
Make sure your audio is plugged in. And you're not muted on your laptop. We cycle it on and off again. Yeah, try that.
Yeah, it wasn't.
The other alternative is unplug your headphone jack and just put that microphone down to the speakers and make sure it's playing. You have to reposition the laptop over so you can put the mic.
Yeah, do you have another sound to pass? Or just anything else? Not like the from this? You have no other sound?
No, I'm just thinking.
Oh. No, this is not, yeah. It probably shorts it out. But if this is already shorting it out, then it probably is not gonna. Then we have a better.
Because we did the whole interview.
Okay.
You want me to try? I
Yeah,
only have a PowerPoint copy. I mean, I have a PDF copy.
yeah, because I can't send it, it's too big to email, that's why.
You know what you could do is, if you want to put this in a different computer, play that thing, and then you can plug, you can just have it set. Just on TV.
Which one?
Over there.
Oh, okay.
Over there.
So how do I? Do you have a clicker?
You didn't bring a special board?
He's kidding.
Oh.
We'll give you a clicker.
It's HDMI, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's the same.
Literally 2 minutes.
It happened to me in the last one too. I don't remember what it finally took to fix it.
So that's like that.
What happens to it when you just over here?
She should just push that button, just like, if she set it up right, yeah. No, she didn't set it up, so you're gonna have to go yourself here and just click, on that.
Yeah, I just like.
Yeah, I'll turn it down. That's loud.
So then go over until you get to your video slide. And then you have to walk after this section. Okay, cool. All right. So, yeah. On this.
If you just push the black button. See that? I usually push this black button, it's on. When you're ready, push the black button on. Okay.
All right, thank you.
No problem, thank you.
We ready to bring the jury up?
Yes, you're on.
All right, let's go ahead and bring them.
All rise as the jurors in the courtroom, please.
Please be seated. Stevens.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The first thing I want to let you know is we accept your verdicts. And yet the most solemn decision lays ahead of you, and that's whether Mark Wilson lives in obscurity with a punishment of life without the possibility of parole, never released, isolated in a tiny cell away from society forever, or whether he is put to death. Now, you've heard from the judge that a sentence of death is never required because the law in Florida will never compel nor require you to determine that Mark Wilson should be put to death. A sentence of life is always enough. And the way that we get there is mitigation. Now, in jury selection, we talked about this part of the trial, where you hear about Mark Wilson's life, where he lived, how he lived, but now it's in the context of mitigation. And you're going to hear about Mark's life as much as we're able to in a short period of time, because now you are responsible for his life. You'll see from the evidence what many of you already have realized. Mark Wilson has a broken mind, not legal insanity, but he's not well, and he's not truly right-minded. And already you know this from the statement, what you heard in that first half of the trial. The disconnected thinking, the memory problems, the bizarre reasoning that Cindy had given him a message, and that message was in a look, that it was his turn to kill the boys, his turn to kill Robert and Taiten, because he thought Cindy had killed her sister and youngest son. Then the statement that he needed to protect his daughter from Robert and Taiten because of sexual allegations. That is the reasoning of a man with a broken mind. And in that same statement, when you've seen this video, he's in that statement with Detective Usina, with tears, looking at photos of those young boys that were crushed by him. And what did he say in that room? He loved them. In tears, he said he loved them, but tears and sorrow will never undo his actions, and he must be punished. And that's what we're here for. But the law, and you remember that video or that diagram that the state had put up with the bowling ball on one side, saying the great weight for the aggravators and the mitigators. Even if you get to that point, you still do not have to vote for death. Now, in jury selection, each of you said that you could give consideration to mitigation in support of a life sentence. And I want you to remember and honor that commitment and continue to listen carefully and consider the penalty of life for Mark. Now, in the first phase, each of you had to agree. You had to reach one verdict together. But in this phase is different. You are now individuals. You're going to weigh and consider the aggravators, and you're going to look at those aggravators, and if they're proven beyond a reasonable doubt, you will never have to choose death. The mitigators are any reason that you find individually to choose for life. Now, here at the end, you'll decide if the punishment with 12 individual verdicts for life or for death. And you do not need to be unanimous. By that, I mean you don't have to agree with each other. Here at this phase, each of you as jurors will make individual, personal, moral judgments. Now, we're not going to ask you to forgive Mark. We're not going to ask you to like Mark. We're going to ask for your compassion, for your understanding. We're going to ask for your mercy. In the end, we're going to ask you to find that the aggravation does not outweigh the mitigation. Because all the aggravation that the state will present to you is rooted in the poor soil of his youth and the repeat of shortcomings of his childhood, a childhood with a constant rotation of abuse, hard drugs, and neglect. Now, as a child, the very person who was supposed to care for him exposed him to hard drugs like crack and meth. Mark was guided by a mind that was damaged by trauma, but not even he is beyond redemption. Broken mind, a broken home, a broken childhood, and you know that broken people don't happen overnight. So you're going to hear from witnesses that tell you about Mark's life. You'll hear from his mother, Chrissy Atkins, and you've seen her before already. You'll find out that as a teen, she met Mark's father, Mark Wilson Sr. And she was away from school, she was away from her family, her friends, and she was in love. And she got pregnant and she was in love. And then he hit her. And then he hit her. And then he hit her. And it took her years to get away. And she did. She got away from Senior, but she never got full custody of her son. Her son, Mark Wilson Jr. Often, he was left alone with his father, left in a cycle of violence and drugs. Now, you're going to hear that she was not the best mom. She was a teen mom, and she had some maturing to do. But I need you to know that this trial is not a trial to blame the mother. This is not a trial to blame his father. We will present the history of his childhood so that you can understand and see his background. Now, after his mother got away, his father met Kim McMahon. And she had 2 sons with Senior. And Kim was attentive. She made sure he ate, that he had clean clothes. And she was a loving mom, but Kim was mentally ill. And Kim suffered. Just like Chrissy, Kim suffered with his father because once again, Senior was a violent man. Then Senior took Junior away to Arizona. And there, Senior met and married Nadine Bilberry. And there in Arizona, the new family was formed. It was Senior, it was Nadine, it was her 3 children, Cody, Travis, and Kelsey, along with Mark Jr. And out west, Junior and his step-siblings were together. And they experienced neglect and abuse and trauma. Now, those children today, they're adults. And they've all done their best to forget those days of hunger, and violence and constant movement between Arizona and Oklahoma. And back again. And that cycle stopped. That cycle of abuse and neglect and trauma and constantly moving stopped because one day the police were finally contacted. Because the children were left alone again, but this time with a waitress that lived in the Tucson Indian. And the children were finally removed. So Senior and Nadine did not have those children anymore. Junior went to live with his paternal grandfather, Senior's father, and Cody, Travis, and Kelsey. They were also removed and they went to live with their father, all in Arizona. But from that split, that two groups never saw each other again. Now, all this time, Chrissy was in Florida, not knowing about the constant movements between Arizona and Oklahoma, having some idea, but not really understanding where her son was. So she's in Florida, wondering and waiting. But now she knows he's in Arizona, and soon he's able to visit her in Florida. And he did. He came down to Florida for the summer and spent it with his mom. And Chrissy had a new family. She had several children with Kevin Woodard. And Chrissy and Kevin did not have room for Junior. They lived a simple life. They lived a flawed life. And when Junior visited, he was introduced to crack cocaine by Kevin Woodard, his mom's boyfriend. So Junior traveled back and forth between Arizona and Florida. But those lost years that he spent with his father had a price, and that price was addiction. Junior never received counseling for the trauma. So how did he deal with all that pain and hurt? He turned to drugs. Junior, as a child, developed drug addiction because Junior was broken. Now, on one trip back to Arizona, his grandfather refused to take him, and he was sent to a group home. And after some time, Junior was able to return to Florida, and this time to his mother's father's home, his grandfather Atkins. And here in Florida, his grandfather gave him a home and a stable life. Now, there were problems, but there was love. And in time, Mark Jr. and his girlfriend Vicky, they dropped out of school and they started to move together. And they were young and they were broken. And Mark and Vicky Hall used drugs to drown out the pain of their childhood. And they had a son together, and that child was put up for adoption. Around this time, Mark began his contacts with the criminal justice system. So you'll hear from witnesses who will also testify to that. But later, Junior met Cindy. And together, he and Cindy had a baby girl named Caitlin. And again, he and Cindy had a tie. And they were bound together by a broken childhood. Their daughter, Caitlin, and met. Now, a number of experts have met with Mark Jr., and sometimes I was there. And you'll hear their opinions about Mark and his broken life. Again, in the first phase, you had to listen and you had to deliberate together. You had to reason together, come together and reason and reach one agreement. Here, I'm going to ask you to continue to pay attention to each witness, and they'll give you a small piece of Mark's life for you to individually weigh and consider. Now, mitigation is never, I have to repeat this, is never going to be offered to you as a justification or a defense or an excuse for what you've learned in the first phase of this case. Those two young boys were children, and that was a tragedy, and there's no excuse. And if you're sitting here looking for the excuse, you've already ruled it out with your verdict. You've ruled out defenses with your verdict. So really, the only thing we can give you at this point is mitigation. Reasons for you to vote for life, but not excuses. Now, the mitigation is fact or circumstance that can be relied upon you individually as you choose life, and for you individually to look for, to value, to weigh in the context of your own individual personal moral judgment and with your own personal sense of mercy. Now know that even if, like that picture that you were shown with the bowling ball, even if all the aggravators are there and you find zero mitigators, in Florida, you will still never have to vote for death. We chose you. We agreed to trust you, and when I say we, I'm including Mark Wilson Jr. and the entire team. And we respect your verdicts, but we're going to continue to trust you to make the right decision. And at the end of this proceeding, we're going to ask you to vote for the penalty of life. We're going to ask you to vote for the penalty of life because Mark is a person and he does have value. When I said we accept your verdicts, know that Mark has accepted your verdicts from back in August of 2020. Remember, he confessed to his mother. Not once, not twice. He was inside the home, he confessed, outside the home, and again in the park. And then you watched as he confessed to Detective Lucina. And he sat there with that detective and he was shaking. Now, he's accepted those chains then, and he accepts them now. You may have heard the rattling in court from time to time as he shakes from his anxiousness and his nerves. But again, when that verdict was read and he was shaking, he accepted your verdict. You remember when the two uniformed officers at that verdict was read and they went and stood directly
Don't
behind him?
object. This is improper opening statement. It's what facts will be shown.
No, overruled. You may continue to speak.
So those two officers stood directly behind him as that verdict was read. And this is his life, in chains now and forever, surrounded by law enforcement, officers, sheriffs. Every move he makes, the evidence will show you, whether it's his first or his last, will be with permission and only with the permission of law enforcement. Not the judge, not his attorney, law enforcement, sheriffs and officers. And that is his life for the rest of his life, under the control and the authority of others. Now, Mark's a broken man, and we're going to ask you to punish him. We're going to ask you to spare his life. We're going to ask that you spare his life and punish all of his days with a life penalty. A life penalty is not 3 meals in a bed. A life penalty is prison, because in Florida, a life sentence is life. He'll never be released, never paroled, punished and placed far away until his last breath. And then when his body is cold and a medical examiner has confirmed his death, then and only then is he released. I'm going to ask you at the end of this again to vote for life. Thank you.
All right, written first reading this.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense calls Pam Wilson.
All right, ma'am, if you come on up here, there's a seat right here next to me. I'm gonna sit there and pull right up to that microphone and speak directly into it. Once you get situated, the first thing we'll do is have the clerk place you.
Raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this call shall be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If you could start off by telling us your full name, please.
My name is Pamela Wilson.
And where do you live? What town?
I live in Leesburg, Virginia.
All right, thank you. You may proceed then, speakers.
Pam, how are you employed?
I'm a team lead for a group of software engineers, and I work for a company. We provide managed services for major telecommunications companies.
All right. And can you please describe to the jury your second job?
I also have a side business where I work in the horse industry, and I do horse transport. I do exercise riding, and I braid horses' manes.
All right. And how do you know Mark Wilson Jr.?
He's my nephew. He's my brother's son.
And the name of your brother?
Mark Wilson Sr.
Now, you're aware that Junior was convicted?
Yes, and I think what he did is horrible, and the Baker family has my deepest sympathies for their loss.
Now, Runner, may I approach?
You may.
You can take a look at what's been marked as defense exhibit B1 through B26. Or easier to keep it.
These are pictures of my family.
Yeah. Then what's been marked as defense exhibit C.
These are more pictures of my family. Timeline. I haven't seen this
Okay.
previously.
And as to, sorry, defense exhibit B1 through 26, is that a fair and accurate representation of the photos that you had shared?
Yes,
Your Honor, defense moves to enter into evidence defense exhibit B1 through 26.
No objection, Joe.
All right, without objection, I believe that's one, is that correct then? For
yes, sir.
defense 1A through Z as in Zulu.
And then Pamela, the PowerPoint that you looked at, is this a fair and accurate representation of what you're prepared for today?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, defense moves into evidence what's been marked as C1 through C16.
Any objection?
No, sir, are those just repeats of the same photographs?
Yes.
So I'm
It's
just
the
asking to be
PowerPoint.
identified just for purposes of the court. I don't think we need two of the same photograph, Judge.
If they're the same photos, they're just arranged differently, I presume like single pages or something like that.
Yes, Your Honor, it's just for the PowerPoint, it's not separating them.
We'll just, what we do is mark, you can leave it marked as just defense C for the record. Since they've already been admitted separately, they don't need to be admitted again. We can do this, so just leave them as C for the record.
Thank you.
Not objection to the substance of them, just.
So Pam, if you could describe to the jury what's in this photo.
Okay, yes, this is my parents on their wedding day. They were married in August of 1964 in Mason, Wisconsin.
And how do you know Richard Wilson?
Richard Wilson is my father.
And how was he employed?
My father has a PhD in botany, and he started off his career as a professor at the University of Texas in Austin. And he later moved into private industry where he was doing studies on drift of herbicides for crops.
And what, originally your mom was a stay-at-home mom, but what did she do for employment outside the home?
So my mom worked in a medical research lab. She started off in St. Louis, Missouri, and then the bulk of her career was at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And she was the head of a medical research lab there, where PhD students would come to her and request guidance and ask her questions. And they were working on trying to isolate a DNA strand where they could treat it with some medicine to help birth defects in children. So it was a really neat thing that she was doing.
So now turning to this slide here, who were the people in this photo?
Okay, so this photo was taken in South Africa. My mother was born in South Africa. And the people in this photo are my mother on the back row. It's my mother, Joan, my father, Harry Bigwood, my grandmother, Doris Bigwood, my mother's sister, Colleen. In the front row, these are the grandchildren. My cousin Garth on the left, my cousin Sharon, my brother Mark Sr., and myself in the green dress.
Okay, now can you describe, so you've identified your grandparents in this photo. Can you describe what Doris and Harry Bigwood were like, their personal?
They were very happy, loving grandparents, very witty. There was always a joke being told. It was a very happy, loving, happy family environment.
And what did your grandfather do for employment?
So my grandfather also worked in the horse industry. He had a love for horses in the initial part of his career, and then he worked as a car mechanic afterwards. And he would bring horses home sometimes, and my mom and her sister would ride them.
Now, this is, if you could describe to the jury the individuals here.
Okay, so this is the Wilson side of the family. In the black and white photo to the left is my grandfather, Perry Wilson. The woman with the white hair, that's my mother, my grandmother, sorry, Helen Wilson. I'm the little girl with the brown hair, and the little boy is my brother, Mark Senior.
So this would have been your grandparents.
Yes, my grandparents, sorry.
So can you describe your grandfather, Perry Wilson, his personality?
So my grandfather, Wilson, he was, he had a very active mind. He was a scientist also, and he was just kind of always a little bit of a nervous, anxious type of a guy. I recall one time we went to the bank when I was a small child, and we were waiting in line at the bank, and he was just very anxious.
I'm going to object as to relevance to our Mr. Wilson in any way. These are just stories about distant, nothing relevant.
Your Honor, defense would tie this into mitigation at the end. You can finish that story about the bank.
Okay. So I just thought that was odd for my grandfather to be so nervous and anxious waiting in line at a bank.
Now, between these two photos, it's the same individuals, but what changed between the photo on the left and the one on the right?
So my grandfather suffered a stroke, and it was quite severe stroke, and he was paralyzed on the left side of his body. He had limited use of his left hand and leg. His speech was impaired. And he had to walk with a cane after a stroke. He mellowed out quite a bit after the stroke.
Now, who's in this photo?
So I'm the one that's playing the game to the pipette. It's my father with the brown hair, and my brother in the background.
Now, around this age, what did you start to notice about your father?
So this was when we lived in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was of the age where I was becoming more aware of mood swings with my father. And just the slightest thing would get him very, very agitated. Sometimes he would get really irritated with my mother and I. We had a small spat, and he would chase my brother around the house and spank him. It was never so severe that we had to call an ambulance or, police got involved or anything, but I just felt like it was the punishment didn't always meet the offense.
Now, what was it like when your father had these moods?
It was just very scary, because it was so unpredictable, and I didn't understand why he would get so mad over such a small thing.
Now, can you give an example of your father acting out violence in the
So at times, my father and my mother would argue, and sometimes their arguments were quite heated, and they would throw furniture, break furniture. They would break lamps. It's just, for a small child, that's a scary thing, because you don't know what's going on. You don't understand why your parents are so angry with each other.
Where would you go when this happened?
I would go in my room and hide.
And your brother?
I think he was doing the same. We were just scared.
Now, who are the individuals in this photo?
Okay, so these are my cousins on the Wilson side of the family. My brother is the boy with the blonde hair. Next to him is my cousin Susan. I'm in the red dress, and on the far right is my cousin Christopher.
Now, can you describe your cousins today? Because this picture was taken some time ago.
In the 70s, yes.
Can you
So-
describe it today?
Yes, so both my cousin Susan and Chris are very well educated. They have PhDs in their respective area of interest. My cousin Christopher is a professor at Tulane University. He's been successful in his career. My cousin Susan, she has struggled with mental health issues since she was a teenager, and she has been in therapy basically since she was a teenager. She has severe problems with depression and anxiety, and she's had trouble holding down a job. She has published a book on poetry, which is her area of interest. It's out there as well.
Now, you described that both of them had advanced degrees, but if you could describe what issues Chris had.
I'm going to object as to all these people that are relevant to Mark Wilson we're here for.
Your Honor, again, we're showing the family history in the background, and then we tie it in the end as to how this family tree is connected to Mr. Wilson.
I'll allow a little bit of latitude here. This is getting a bit
In terms of Chris, if you could describe his struggle.
Chris struggled with alcoholism.
Now, who's the main source here?
This was my mother and Mark Senior and myself. This was after my parents got divorced. We had moved to Gainesville and my brother had gotten an apartment and he got into trouble and he was on house arrest and that's when he met Chrissy.
Now, in terms of, what did you learn about your parents leading up to the divorce?
My father had been unfaithful to my mother, and that's part of what led to their divorce.
Now, who are the couple in this, or the two couples in this photo?
So my mom remarried to a gentleman named Wayne Lanier. She was very happy in this marriage. They were kind of meant to be together. So on the left is Wayne. Next to Wayne is my mother. Then Mark Senior, and this is Chrissy, and this is Mark Junior as a baby.
Now, what differences did you notice in the relationship between Wayne and your mother versus your mother and your father?
My mom was just much happier with Wayne. They were much suited to be together than she was with my father.
And how did your mom's employment stop?
My mom developed lupus and she just became unstable and she couldn't work with the pipettes that she needed to in the lab that she was in. So she retired.
And did she have a series of strokes leading up to that?
She did. She had several mini strokes.
And then your father, if you could describe what we see now.
Okay, so this was my father and his current wife, and this was at their wedding reception.
And are they still together today?
Yes, they are still together today. My father has dementia now, and Pat, which is his current wife, takes care of him.
And where do they live?
They live in Tucson, Arizona.
And from time to time, who else lived with them?
So Mark Senior and Mark Junior have lived with my father.
And can you describe how Junior got along with your father, his grandfather?
So I saw some of the same behavior patterns with my father that I saw with my brother, with Mark Jr. I wasn't with them a lot, but there was one incident where I saw my father strike Mark Jr. across the head very hard for something that was just a very minor thing. He wouldn't get up out of a chair and he struck him really hard.
Now, how's Richard today, your father?
He has dementia. He's in into the later stages of dementia.
And about 11 years ago, what happened?
So 11 years ago, my father was convicted of a sex crime with a minor.
Judge, I'm gonna object how any of this is relevant.
Your Honor, this was a caregiver of the defendant we're talking about. And you were saying that your father had been convicted.
My father had been convicted of a sex crime against a minor and he went to prison.
And how long was he in prison for that?
He was in prison for 5 years.
Now, if you could tell the jury who's in this photo.
This is a picture of me with Mark Jr. when he was young.
And what's the occasion?
This was Thanksgiving.
Now, you've seen a series of video recordings. Do you recognize the individuals in them? It's not up yet. but-
Okay.
Okay, do you remember the video?
I do remember the videos, yes.
If I may approach your honor.
You may.
And before we play, who's in this video? Along with,
This is Mark Jr.
and what's the occasion?
It's Cody's birthday.
And who's Cody?
Cody is my nephew
Okay, and so is Mark Jr.
and Mark Jr. is my nephew.
Look at it, Junior. You did.
So. Who's that individual?
That's my brother, Mark Senior.
And is this at the same party? Birthday party?
I believe so, yes.
Hey, Mark, what do you want to say to your son on his first birthday?
Happy birthday,
Baby.
baby.
And he's what, eating? He'll be the calm, no, he's fixing ducks. And this is duck, it's not a flat chicken.
That's it.
Now, Mark had other children, not with Chrissy, but who are the other children?
Cody and Hunter, and their mother is Kim McMahon.
Hey, Kimmy, Jesse's calling you.
And if you can identify.
So Mark Junior is standing up on the picnic table with the black shirt on, and Kim McMahon is standing next to him with the brown shirt.
She wants to take this.
Hear me say ow, 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 ow,
This is Junior and Mark and Kimmy. That's what we're looking at now. And Coda, Junior.
The individual that was shaking Junior's shoulders, who was that?
That's my brother, Mark Senior.
Now, were you present for your brother's violent contacts with either Chrissy or Kim
No,
or Nadine?
no.
What happened once you went away for college? Or if you can describe to the jury the relationship with your brother.
Oh, I never had a close relationship with my brother. We were kind of always at odds with each other. We just didn't have a lot in common. We used to bicker a lot.
What things did you have, what interests did you share with him then? If any?
We liked going to the beach. We both enjoyed going to the beach. My parents had a condo over at the beach.
And was there an opportunity where your father had brought everybody in?
Yes. At one point, my father brought Mark Jr. and Victoria and Kim and the nephews all over to the beach, and we got a beach house. And there had been some damage done to one of the rooms. I know that this is my father's complaining about he had to pay the bill. I don't know what they did over there, but they caused some damage to the room.
Meaning Mark and Kim?
Yes.
Now, if you could tell the jury who's the couple in this photo.
This is Mark Jr. and Victoria. This is a girlfriend of Mark Jr.'s.
And what was Mark Jr.'s personality like in his teen years?
He was just always a happy-go-lucky guy. He always had a smile on his face. You were always seeing his dimples. He was just a funny guy. He liked being around people. He was outgoing. He was friendly.
Now, in terms of your nephew, Mark Jr., what do you remember about this couple?
So they had a child together, and his name was
I'm
Samuel.
gonna object, this is all hearsay, what she knows, unless she has personal knowledge of it. She's just gonna start saying stuff.
She's the aunt, she's just describing her.
It's nothing true.
If you could continue, what do you remember?
They have a son named Samuel, and that child was adopted by another family.
And who's this in this photo?
This is my brother. He looks pretty rough here. This is a recent photo of him. He's had ongoing problems with substance abuse, alcohol, and drugs over the years.
And if you could describe to the jury the individuals in this photo.
This is Mark Jr. with his daughter Caitlin, and this is another picture of Caitlin. I became aware of Caitlin because 2 years ago when Mark Jr. was arrested, Chrissy and Mark had reached out to me about possibly adopting her. But I have since learned that her mother and Caitlin are reunited now.
One moment. No further questions, John.
Steve?
Thank you, Judge. I'll start it off. Okay, good, thanks. So just so we're clear, man, Mark Wilson Jr. was a happy child as when he was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yes,
When you saw him, the 10 times you saw him in your life, never saw any signs of trauma on him, right?
I did not.
Right. You never saw him abused in any way, did you?
No, I did. I just told everyone about how I saw him abused
By your dad.
by my dad, yes.
Right, because he was sitting in the seat, your dad asked him to get up, so you could sit down, a woman could sit down, and he wouldn't do it, so your dad hit him, so you could sit down, correct?
I don't think it was because I was a woman. It was because my father thought that I had a solution to the problem we were having with my father's computer.
Right, but then when your father wanted him to get up, so you could sit down, he hit him to do that, correct?
He did.
Right, did he have to go to the hospital?
No.
Right, did he have any bleeding or bruising?
No.
No. So he disciplined him,
It was a harsh discipline.
according to you.
It was a harsh discipline to ask a child to get up out of a chair because he wanted me to sit down because I possibly had a solution to the computer problem.
Outside of that, did you ever see any abuse from Mark?
I didn't live with them.
Right, but whenever you saw him, you never saw any abuse, did you?
No.
His mom was a good mom, Miss Atkins, correct?
When I saw them when Mark Jr. was young, she looked like a very caring, giving, loving mom.
You never saw him hungry, you never heard about him being hungry, not having food?
Nope.
Right, and you never heard of him not getting medical care when he needed, correct?
I did not hear about that.
And you even commented all through his teenage years up till, I guess, when he was with Victoria, he was happy, easygoing, carefree, smiling, no issues, right?
Right.
You never knew him to have any mental issues, did you?
I did not know any.
And did you actually talk to Mark Wilson when you mentioned that you, I guess, talked to him about Caitlin at some point?
You're talking about Mark Wilson Jr.?
Judy, yes.
Yes, we emailed about her,
You've spoken to him after the murder, correct?
just through email. No, that's not true. Sorry. We had some phone conversations also. Sorry.
Yes, do you remember one of those phone conversations? Isn't it true that he told you that when you talked to him about the incident?
That's the report.
This is a cross-judge, I can ask her a leading question.
Well, I think you're a couple steps away from the foundation from going right where you want to go, so I'll sustain from there.
Sure. Did you have a conversation with Mark Wilson, Judy?
We did talk on the phone.
And you asked him or discussed about the incident on one occasion, correct?
I don't really recall the phone conversations with him, but I think they're recorded, and so you probably have access to that.
Yes, but
Okay.
do you remember maybe less than 2 weeks ago, we had a deposition?
Yes.
Remember you swore to tell the truth, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that was transcribed here, right?
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna approach and show you. It's page 15. It's gonna be line 7 through 12. Let's see if that helps refresh your memory.
Okay, sure.
Yes, ma'am. It's highlighted, so it'll help
I'm
you.
gonna need my glasses.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, just read it to yourself, man, nobody knows.
Okay, starting at 15.
Yes. You just read for the next 5 or 6 lines.
Okay, yes, I do recall that.
Okay, so that refreshed your memory?
Yes.
So what did he tell you during your phone conversation with him?
As stated in the transcript there, his sentiment, I don't recall the exact words, but his sentiment was that what's being displayed in the media and what you're hearing online is not exactly the way things went.
Well, it isn't your exact words, and I'll tell me if I'm misreading the
Okay.
words, but he said, this is not right, it's not right, it's not my fault. And
Yes,
it shouldn't be happening this way. Just wait until everyone finds out, you'll know what really happened.
yes,
Right, so he told you it wasn't his fault, right?
yes.
Okay, no further questions.
And Wilson, is there any question in your mind that Mark Jr. is responsible?
Judge, objection outside the scope. She's already.
Just ask him.
No, I think this is permissible.
I'm sorry, repeat the question?
Do you have any questions about Mark's responsibility?
No, I don't.
And in terms of what you saw in his childhood, had you seen any abuse? Would you have taken some action?
Yes,
And in terms of what you know of your brother, you didn't see him violently abusing Chrissy.
no,
You did not see him violently abusing Kim.
no,
But you're aware that these things happened.
yes.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Permanent or temporary exclusion? Permanent? All right, thank you. Your exclusion for the name. All right, that's probably a good point to take a break for lunch, so. Ladies and jury, we'll go ahead and take our lunch break now. We'll go, about an hour, we'll be back. CC. 1:30.
If we get a few extra minutes to get around town, please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else while you're in this one state. I'm thinking, please step out.
Your executive courtroom.
Take up our presence. All right, we'll be in recess till, we'll come back at 1:30. So we can make sure that the rest of the meeting will be in recess till then. I think we can see it. People, by your next witness.
No, jail staff.
All right. Thank you. All right, sir, if you would go ahead and take a seat and speak directly into that microphone, the clerk will place you on the
Solemnly swear affirmative testimony shall be the responsibility of the truth, so help God. Thank you.
All right, sir, if you would start off by stating your full name for reference. Gerald Sapp. All right, thank you, Mr. Sapp. You may proceed, Ms. Davis.
Mr. Sapp, how are you employed?
I'm president for with Electric County Work Release Center as a corrections counselor.
And prior to becoming a corrections counselor, what did you do for that?
I have a background as a state and felony probation officer. I work as a state and county level correction officer. I work law enforcement and school resource officer, private investigator, drug counselor, and I'm currently a corrections counselor.
And how long have you been a correctional counselor?
For about 5 years.
And if you can tell us what exactly is a correctional counselor?
So what we do at the Work Release Center, when the inmates come over from the county jail, we orientate them. Our job is basically for their reentry back into society. We make sure they're employed, they follow all the rules and regulations. We drug test them, alpha sensors, just totally regulate and manage them while they're at the Work Release Center.
And are there certain types of employment that you all help them find?
We have a job book. It's mostly restaurant work, but we provide different, it's all sorts of warehouse work, all sorts we provide for them.
And briefly, you can tell us what are the general requirements or expectations when they come to the center, other than finding work?
Well, we usually make sure they have them in a year. We try and avoid ones with violent crimes. The judge usually has to recommend work release, and then they also screen for work release to see if they will be fit for it.
And specifically, what is work release do they do at the center? Like, could you define that for us?
Basically, what we do, we're case managers for those that come over. So we monitor them each and every day. When they go, when they come, we have a lot of rules that they have to follow, and we follow their progress. For when they're released, we hope that they have stable employment and gain, good reentry back to society.
I know you mentioned earlier, but they are subject to checking in with their counselors and things of that nature.
Yeah, constantly, yes.
And how is it that you came to meet Mark Wilson Jr.?
He came, I would say September of 2017. He came to work release and they put him on my caseload.
So you were his specific assigned counselor?
Yes.
And what's the first thing you did when you met with Mr. Wilson?
Where you orientate them, you find out any job skills they have. Then you try and assign them work. If we don't have anything, we have them go out and job seek themselves. And we monitor them. When they get a job, we go out there and job check. We check the supervisor to see how they're doing. Monitor them through the whole process.
And particularly with Mr. Wilson, did he have a particular job set that he was able to utilize?
Yes, he said he was good at mechanics, auto repair. So he found a job at a auto body shop, auto repair shop.
Do you remember where that auto repair shop was?
It was in Gainesville. It wasn't too far from the center. It was at Sun City Auto.
And do you know how many hours he was working at that location, how his pay was, things of that nature?
It was average of 40 hours a week. I don't recall exactly when he was getting paid at the time. I think it was around 2 hours.
And while he was working, did you ever go check up on him at the site? Did he have to check in with you?
Yes, so we have to do job checks on them. I've checked up on them several times.
And where was he living during his time in the program?
They actually live at the workplace center. We provide moving board for them.
And as far as the work situation, are there any other additional requirements such as group sessions?
Yeah, we have group sessions. We have individual sessions as well.
If we could talk about the group sessions for a minute, how often are those group sessions?
We do them once a week.
And how long are they?
Roughly from 30 minutes to an hour.
And what things are covered during those group sessions?
Basically, we talk about their background, their history, we talk about life. We talk about budgeting. We talk about the thinking process. We cover the whole background. And we talk about resume writing, job seeking, anything that we think would help them out. We talk about a lot of life skills as well.
What about the individual group sessions? Are those kind of the same?
Those are more private. We call them in, ask them how they're doing, how they're adjusting, any issues with their peers there, any problems. And that's just a one-on-one conversation.
And did Mark Wilson participate in both the group and individual sessions?
Yes.
How was he as a participant?
He was interactive during the group sessions. He contributed back. He wasn't quiet. He shared his opinions and his thoughts on the discussions we had.
Was that the same for the individual sessions as well?
Yes.
Was he compliant throughout his whole entire time during the program?
Yes, I had no issues with him. He was under my supervision for about 3 months. I had no major issues I can recall with him.
And so did he successfully complete his sentence at the work release center?
Yes, he did.
One moment. No further questions, Jeremy.
Steve? Thank you, Judge. Hi, Mr. Seth. How you doing, sir? Good. Thanks for waiting today. Sorry. So Mr. Wilson was a mechanic, is that correct?
Yes.
He was able to do the hard pass-through mechanic, fix cars, do that kind of stuff?
Yes.
You had a lot of time to interact with him, would that be fair?
Yes.
Would it be a fair statement that you did not see any mental illness with him at all?
No.
When you were talking to him, was he able to communicate with you like a normal person of competent mental status?
Yeah, friendly, outgoing.
Right, and when you guys had the group sessions, did he ever have to do things odd or weird, or did he always communicate normally with you?
No.
Okay, and he was able to communicate coherent thoughts in a straight manner to you when you had conversations?
Yes.
Did you ever notice him having memory issues? Like you'd say, "Where'd you go today?" and he forgot.
No.
Okay, so his memory was good.
Yes.
Sir, could Appreciate it. Any reserve?
And Mr. Sapp, you don't have any training as a psychologist?
No.
I've heard a question, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Staff. I'm going to step down. You're free to go about your business. Next witness, please.
Aaron Morris, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Morris, you go ahead and take a seat there. Report the place you on the road.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony shall give in this call should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Please state your full name for the record.
Erin Morris.
All right, thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Morris.
Hi.
If you could just remind the jury what you do for a living.
Sure. I'm a crime laboratory analyst in the crime scene investigation section at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
And if you could also remind them what your role was on August 26th and 27th of 2020.
Absolutely. So I was requested to respond to a scene on Tyler Road in order to document the process and collect evidence.
And as part of documentation, did that include taking photos?
It did.
Aaron, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Morris, I'm showing you what's been previously marked as exhibit A1 through A5. If you can take a look at those, please. Do you recognize those photos?
I do.
How do you recognize those photos?
From review of my case file.
And at this time, the defense will move exhibit A1 through A5 as evidence as defense 2.
Judge, we just asked to go sidebar for relevancy issues.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We should approach the witness again.
Yes, you can.
You're looking at photos and scores. Are those a fair and accurate depiction of photos that you had taken on August 27th with the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Come on, Karen.
The Eastern District of New York, Alexander Solomon, as well as Assistant Attorney General.
All rise, the truth's in the house. Y'all bring it up, breaking it down. Hear that call? Facts and defense, a mighty blend. Oh yeah, justice ain't gonna bend. Gable hits, the facts commence. Defensive moves, we've got the sense. Teamwork strong, no crime secret.